Hi, Elena.
What's up, Richelle?
I just realized that on the last video, I kept pointing to you over there because in my screen, you're over there, but it flips it around in the recording. So I'm like pointing over here, but you're over there. So
Hopefully people can
for our
figure it
friends
out.
at home watching this, I'm going to try to get it straight. I'm Richelle Ricard. We are the yoga engineers. My partner, Elena Chung. We are coming to you again with another of the Yoga Engineers podcast. Last time we were talking about some specific bony architecture in the body, and this time we've got some other things to talk about. Um, yeah, Elena, you want to
Cool.
open us up with the question that you kind of asked, or or conundrum that we face today?
Yeah. So this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and I kind of had a hard stance on it coming right out the gate. And I still feel that way, but I'm curious to hear your 2 cents on this whole idea of like free yoga right now,
Yeah.
whether or not it should be free, and the implication behind those opinions. I guess I'm curious to hear what you think first, because I know I have a lot to say. So
Yeah,
you first,
totally.
Rochelle.
Well, when we have a conversation, we both tend to have a lot to say, and so I will begin a few years back when I moved to Texas in 2011. I was working in Austin at a brand new studio that was 100% donation based. There were a couple studios in town that were really thriving on that model, and as a brand new studio going into like pretty thick competition in a city like Austin, it was um, it was a tough model to like actually move forward on and build a business on. Um, and one of my very long time veteran yoga teacher friends said, I just I don't like it. I don't like that everyone gets to just like put a value on your worth as a teacher and as a person trying to make a living. I feel much more comfortable if you know your value and you like really put that out there in the world and demand that people meet you there. And I saw her point. I really did. I also was in a community of musicians, folk artists, and very poor young people who needed a yoga experience to be healthy physically and mentally in the conditions that they were in at the time. And so at that point, it felt good to me to be able to offer them something and meet them where they were. Um, that said, fast forward to today, and I I feel as though I am not undermined, particularly as a professional, especially in the circumstances we find ourselves in now, with many people laid off. This is just the first week of May 2020. We're all in quarantine for at least a month already. Some of us longer, 6 weeks. Um, and so it's it's one of those situations where I think we're doing what we got to do to both put our magic, our energy, our voice, our gift, if you want to look at it that way, out into the world for people who need it, and receiving. Like right now, my classes online are by donation, and I feel good about that because I can provide this thing for students that don't have a physical studio option to go to, and are um, laid off, don't have funds, are trying to figure out how they're even going to pay their rent. These stressful situations. Again, feeling like it's an honor and a privilege to offer them what it is I'm doing. Um, the other side of that, I feel ever so slightly guilty because the studios that I teach at normally, while they're not employing me to do their online classes, they are trying to stay afloat by selling online memberships right now. And
Mhm.
so I do question, and I haven't, I mean, I'm teaching, so I guess I've answered the question in action, but I I do sometimes go, oh, am I taking money away from those studios by offering this other option? Am I taking away students who would be paying them, who are now coming to me because it's free? I think the actual question in there is, are they coming to me because it's free, or are they coming to me because I'm me?
Exactly. I
So
think that's a huge question. And it's really hard to untangle that piece, right, without like asking directly. But I don't know. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And like, I think my problem with the whole concept is I hate seeing that people are shaming others for offering things for free. I think that is like something that sits really poorly with me. And I know that you and I have talked at length about this, but like, I think that when we make the statement that free yoga devalues what the rest of us are doing, I don't think that the problem is free yoga. I think it's the fact that we have to ask, like, why are we so threatened by something that's free? Because other industries don't have to feel that level of being threatened, right, by free services. Like, they can feel confident in knowing, like plumbers offer videos on like tutorials how to do things, for how to fix shit yourself for free all the time. But that doesn't put them out of business. It maybe even drives business to them. And
try
like,
totally, yeah. Try
it's
this
crazy
first
to
and then
me.
call us.
Exactly. It's like once you jack it up more. So like the point, I feel like people don't even trust that what they have to offer is worth paying for. And I know that's a really strong statement as a blanket statement. So I don't mean that everyone feels that way, but I'm certain that that's like a part of it, right? It's like if we aren't even sure of our worth, that's why we're so like, how could we not be threatened by people offering free yoga?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think that um, if you come at it from a strictly like business school standpoint, there are um, two ways to market yourself. That is, invest money in outreach, whether that's advertising or business cards or flyers or announcements or whatever, or offer free shit. Like, those are your
Yeah.
two options, right, for marketing funnels. So you either come into people's awareness because of an offer of a discount or a freebie, right? Or you pay to put yourself out in the in their visual, in their auditory, right, in their world. And so um we as business people pay for that either way. We're either giving away our time and our energy, or we're using our old time and energy that did earn us some money and putting that into a certain place. I think that the circumstances we're in right now are slightly different because this isn't a marketing scheme. Like, to a certain extent, of course, like, I'm hoping that people recognize me and the yoga engineer, and after we come back into the real world, the somewhat next version of the world, let's say that.
Yeah. Good
When
catch.
we come through onto the other side, whatever that looks like, my hope is that they remember this service that I have offered them, and they keep coming back for more, and they buy the book, and they go to your workshops, and they listen to our podcast for longer time, right? And go on retreat with us and that kind of thing. And if they don't, it's okay. That's that's the other part of this, is that I know that the service that we are giving is worth the money we charge on the other side. Like, you and I both have
Yeah.
a private practice, right? That we don't balk at charging reasonable professional prices for what it is we offer in a one-on-one environment. And so the people who get a free online class from me, like, that's going to be a wholly different experience than when I'm there with them in person, giving them very detailed personal analysis and instruction. They will pay
Yeah.
for
And
that.
I think you have to trust that the right people will acknowledge that difference. And the people who are like not willing to pay in like regular times or whatever, um, they're not the people who are going to be your students anyways. And those are the people who like prefer to use ClassPass and, you know, hop around from studio to studio, and they're not invested in that level of attention. And so like those weren't the people you were trying to get to you in the first place, right? But I think that something else you said like really touched on this like other comment. So people say that it devalues yoga or the services we offer when you offer it for free, and also that it sets the expectation that yoga will be free after we go back to like regular life, which is insane to me. It's like,
Totally.
it's so like nobody else draws that expectation. And there's like so many companies that are offering like limited free services, or they're like limiting giving free things or discounts to like first responders and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And no one is going to have that expectation when we go back to normal that stays. And I just don't know why, what it is we think of the consumer of yoga. Like, I guess we inherently don't have a trust with them, and that's why we think like we think so little of our relationship with our students then, if that's what we're assuming.
Yeah, I think that it would be really interesting to me to hear the different arguments made by yoga teachers who are employees and yoga teachers slash business owners slash studio owners, right? Employees of yoga studios who get paid no matter what they do, who like come in and teach their classes, who have nothing else at stake except like unlocking the front door, logging people in, and like teaching their class. I have a strong inclination to feel like they are probably much more likely to make the arguments of like, you have to know your value, and you have to like, this isn't, you know, charging this yada yada yada, versus the people who know you have to invest something, time or money, in your students to get a return, right? And I think that quality comes into this equation
Definitely.
in a serious way.
Ooh. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Where like my argument initially, which still is my argument, but like if you don't teach, okay, so it's like multi-layers, right? If we don't teach our students to be discerning about the quality of yoga that they receive, then they can't be discerning about the quality of yoga that they receive, which is why they're going to elect for free yoga all the time, right? Like until we establish this difference between what free yoga has to offer versus like paid yoga, whether it's online or in person, like we can't really blame them for not being able to see the difference, right? Because it's our responsibility as yoga teachers to project forth a standard that we're all held to some extent. Like, and I'm not even saying that as like a certifying body or something. I just mean like, we can't expect them to know what we've never taught them.
Totally. And not to pit styles or businesses against each other, but we all know that there are certain business models out there that have a very strict, this is the sequence, this is how you teach it, this is your verbiage, this is your script. Like it is scripted yoga, whether it's a hot environment with the same 26 poses, or whether it is a vinyasa studio that has scripted sequences, or even to the extent of like, this is what the class is called and this is how you teach it, right? Like you have to include this and this, versus classes where this teacher is there present with this current student body, making sure that they're observing and adjusting students as individuals, and stopping to teach whatever isn't being gotten, whether it's by the whole class, maybe it's me not saying it right, maybe it's the way I'm sequencing things, it's not making sense. Having that autonomy and freedom to like really teach the class instead of just leading people through a sequence. If the only place as a student you have ever gone is one of those in the first list, right? You don't even know that the other one exists. You don't even know what it is to have a teacher come up to your mat and be like, well, actually, if you place your foot 4 inches this direction, you're gonna like, this pose is gonna change completely.
Totally.
If you've never had somebody like look at you as an individual practitioner and offer you actual instruction, right? you literally don't know it exists. You don't know that difference. You don't know how your practice can evolve injury free and get stronger, longer, deeper, farther, deeper understanding of the pose because you're holding it longer. Any of those things. I think that you're totally right. Like, we have to educate our students as individuals, and open up that door for them. But the honest truth is that the culture of yoga as a business, there's a whole sector of it that vehemently opposes that by having
Totally.
such uniform, structured protocols and their standard of teaching, right? So it it's a frustrating situation as a teacher who does the
Yeah.
opposite
So what
to.
I think is really interesting about that is like, um, it reminds me of this like thing that I always hear people say, like, well, it's my yoga, right? So because of the fact that yoga is so loosely defined for a lot of reasons, ranging from like traditional or philosophical to like the modern world we're in now, like what that means is that people can be on either end of the spectrum, whether it's like teaching to the individual level, like you're talking about, or something that's really scripted. Um, and like you can make a lot of arguments on both sides, like why it does qualify or doesn't qualify as yoga. But I think that with that freedom of choice, like we're kind of digging our own graves in certain ways, like especially when it comes to something like now, right? Like we see like what really stands the test of time and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And so I think that by getting that freedom to like define yoga as whatever, like we have to accept the inherent risks that come with it, and we can't try to hold other people back just because what they're doing is better in some ways, or like shines in a certain light or capacity.
For
So
sure.
I think that's really interesting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that in many ways, as yoga teachers, and as yoga practitioners, we are given this idea slash belief system that, um, of non-grasping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that aparigraha? I think one of the niyamas. Um, Here is where I tell you just how little I know, or I know it, just that's not where my recall is, in the 8 limbs of yoga.
It
Um,
is. No, you totally got it.
I got it. Okay, check. Thank you, fact checker. Um,
Yeah,
so
no,
the non-grasping has been translated in so many ways to non-greed and non-competition, right?
mm-hmm.
Except that, okay, I am fully in that if you're talking about your own personal practice and your edges and your boundaries, and saying, all right, like I don't need to push to the edge, right? I don't need to grasp for that farther, deeper, whatever. I don't need the teacher to come and like give me this big cranking adjustment so that I can get the full extent of the pose or whatever, right? I totally 100% agree. And yet in the modern world we live in, where yoga, whether we like it or not, is a commodity, right?
Yeah,
it is
totally.
it is something that we buy and sell. um, Business will become a part of this, and in business there's competition and there is differentiation and there is this need and desire to set yourself apart. So many times the way studio owners slash teachers do that is by saying, like, I'm the most unique, I have the most unique this, I have the most unique that, like I sequence with the most flair, I have the most outrageous playlist, right? I i can teach you a yoga sequence to like death metal and it's still yoga. And I'm like, yes, all of that is true, and yes, that can and will differentiate you. But is it better? Is the yoga, is the instruction, is the standard higher, right? How do we shift away from just differentiating by like what's flashy, right? Like, the studios that basically build themselves on the beauty of their studio first and foremost, and then the teaching down the list of it, right? I mean, and here's my bias, and I'm not afraid to say it. I sound like an asshole a lot of the times, but we've talked about it. If somebody told me after class that I'm their favorite yoga teacher because of my playlist, I would throw up in my mouth a little. Like, I don't want to be known for playing someone else's music. If I wanted that, I would be a DJ and I'd be awful at it. So I instead think, how can I, as a yoga teacher, elevate my teaching, my instruction, my knowledge of the thing I'm really teaching right here and how it relates to life? That, you know, is easy to say when anatomy is my strong suit, but you have to pick a thing that to me is inherently actually in the practice, not just this extra thing, the thing the practice is shelled or housed in, the thing that like that shelf sells other than yoga, like pretty jewelry
Yeah.
and blankets and whatever. Like, not to call
Yeah.
anyone else specifically, but
Right. So, well, so like, okay, I think that what you're talking about like brings up this really interesting point where it's like, I feel like the reason people value those things is because that's like what drew them to yoga in the first place, potentially. Not because, and that's not even a commentary on like their personality or their thought process, but it's just like been this repetitive cycle of like, that's what we think good yoga is, right? It's like, how many handstands can you do in one class? Like, it's the cyclical problem. And I think a part of it is because of how unregulated yoga is. And I'm not even here to make a statement about like how much it should or shouldn't be, because I have no fucking clue. I just think that most certainly a part of the lack of quality is the lack of regulation. And I don't know how to like do the regulation and also stick true to what yoga is. So that's not what I'm trying to answer.
yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I think that that's a really hard question to answer. And I think that there's no one really equipped to do it universally. And that's why a certain entity is so useless in my estimation, which is a whole own other podcast episode. But I do think that we as individual yoga teachers can seek out education that like elevates us, right? I mean, I started my yoga, my true regular yoga practice in a gym, right?
Yeah.
And yet it was a meaningful, deep, not just aerobics based workout because my teachers believed in yoga as practice, right? And they had a depth of knowledge about the practice, which included philosophy and mythology and history and these kinds of things. And there were teachers that did totally disparate styles of yoga. Some were very flowy and very dancey, and some were very regimented, and some were very strength based. And I feel like, at this point, gym yoga gets a bad rap because it's like assumed that it's only going to be fitness, right? And it just doesn't have to be. I think it comes down to the teacher, right? It comes down to how you as an individual relate with your teacher and what it is that they're bringing to your life, not just to you on the mat when you're there, but how they translate the practice into everyday life. And I think you're right. Like, we unfortunately come back to that model. Who's giving something away for free and who's putting the money out there? Well, the people who have the money and build these like beautiful temples to a modern yoga practice, like, yeah, they're showing the world what yoga is today, right? They're the ones with the big, huge space. They're the ones like putting the label on it instead of the teachers in the room, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the frustrating point of being a private instructor who really only has their personality and their teaching to like build on. And at the same time, in so many ways, it's so much more fulfilling and so much more uh, satisfying than when I would go to teach at those places and and just be like, oh, no, 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 no. I'm not an individual here. I'm literally just a time slot.
Yeah. You're like a vessel for them to sell their product, whatever the studio is selling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And on that note, it occurs to me that the public perception of an amazing teacher is someone who has 40 people in class, who packs out a room. And I wonder what you think about that. Tell me what your opinion is on that. Because like how a consumer can go into the yoga market, into the world of yoga, outside the electronic world that we're experiencing at the moment. How can they, like, if they don't know the difference, then what can we do to educate them, especially when we have a small scale exposure, at first, at least.
Geez. So you're asking me like, are you asking me what my opinion is on how someone could differentiate?
Yeah.
Like aside from just something as superficial or as fleeting as the numbers in a class.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think maybe if I think to the teachers that I have really gravitated towards and enjoyed and thought were quality, for me, gosh, this is really hard because I think it just really depends on your intention as a student, right?
Mhm.
Like I think that if you don't really care that much, then you could probably just go to, it's like whoever you resonate the most with, right? And
Mhm.
like that's going to be the person who has the best chance of like really getting more than just your foot in the door when it comes to yoga,
Mhm.
right? Because like I do this is a little bit off topic, but I think it's related. Like I definitely agree and see the need for a lot of varying types of yoga such that it brings more people to yoga, and like whether or not they stick with that style, like there's a potential for them to maybe have their eyes opened to something else, right? Like, and but they might not have ever had that chance if they had not started with like super hardcore fast yoga or like slow, like whatever, right? Whatever they started with.
Yeah.
So, but I think for me, what I really liked in my teachers or how I consider them quality would be like if I were able to ask them a question about something. And I think this is also relevant because I often would have students in my public classes like asking me almost always like, oh, something hurts when I do like this hurts, or like I have this problem, like what can I do about it? And what I always thought made a good teacher was someone who would first of all be able to admit what they don't know, but also who could like ask more questions about it. Or if I had a question about an alignment cue, like why do we put our knee over our ankle or something in Warrior Two, they're like, oh, just to like protect the knee. And I'm like, what do you mean though? Why? And they're like, oh, I just learned like understanding their depth of knowledge and then them being able to like know when they don't have an answer. I feel like that was maybe one of the first telling signs for me as to like who was quality and who wasn't.
Yeah.
Which sounds rude. I just mean like who did I like better, I guess.
No, that doesn't sound rude. I think that if we're working on the basis of the idea that we as teachers need to teach our students to be better students, right? If we're the ones who then have to tell them, hey, there's different kinds of yoga, this may or may not be the kind for you, then I think that this is an important thing that we get as individual teachers perspective on, right?
Totally.
And say, no, no, no. Here's a hard list of things that you should consider when looking for a yoga class, right? Like the ability to have some individual attention, the ability to have a conversation with the teacher. Are they there early enough that you can like have preemptory saying, hey, I've had this shoulder thing, keep an eye on it. Hey, I've had this hip thing or this low back, I know how to modify, or can you help me modify, right? Can you literally approach your teacher, or are they the rock star who's like completely aloof and needs their space and time before they start teaching to just like get into the zone? Are they the person, and I'm not saying that that's a bad teacher, I'm just saying that that may be a teacher that doesn't fit all the criteria of like who would be right for you as an individual. um,
Mm-hmm.
are they Can they answer the questions you have? Can they deepen the conversation by asking further questions? I agree with you totally on that. And I also keep coming back to this idea that the numbers are the opposite of what I want to see in some way.
Tell me more, because I have thoughts on the numbers specifically
Okay.
too.
So, I have teachers who I adore, and they are really, really amazing teachers. And also, when you're working in a 1,200 square foot studio space and you literally have 40 plus people, hundreds sometimes, like in a yoga studio practicing at once, as a student coming into that environment, my first thought is there's no way that this teacher is going to look at me as an individual because they just don't have time. Even if that's part of their intention, there's no way, unless I bring specific attention to myself by raising a hand, by talking to them ahead of time, like there's no way I'm going to get a personal, like, attentiveness here. I also then think, is this teacher as good as 100 people, or is it just that it's 6 p.m. on a Thursday? Right?
It's a great question. Yeah.
Right? And so, because I know that, like, in our busy world, in our world where people, parents especially, like, have so little time, professionals, yoga teachers have so little time to, like, carve out for themselves, there might be one block of time that they go to a Pilates class or a yoga class or a dance class or go to the gym, whatever it is. And and those rush hour classes are going to be full almost regardless of who's teaching. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
totally.
so if I was guiding a new student, my instinct would say, don't go to those classes, no matter who's teaching. Even if it's the best teacher I know, pick a different time. Like, pick a
Hmm.
time where their numbers are going to be smaller so that they have the ability to be more personally attentive, to actually, like, shift the cadence or the sequencing of their class based on who's actually doing yoga in that room with them that in that
Totally.
moment. So I actually, yeah, as not just a practitioner but as a teacher, I'm like, I don't want 40 people in a class. Like, yeah, you make a bunch of money, and as a professional trying to make a living, more power to you. But boy, that is past the tipping point for me in both effectiveness and enjoyment of the class I'm taking. Like,
Mm.
I'm much more just like distracted by the people around me when there's that many people. It's harder for me to, like, be in my own bubble. Um, yeah.
I definitely agree with that thought, especially like coming from the perspective of like a brand new student. Like, how would you choose what class to go to? I agree wholeheartedly. And I don't even, and I think uh, what I think from the teaching perspective is like, I feel like there are multiple ways to teach a good class, I suppose is my thought. And like, I guess this also begs the question of whether or not you teach or you think that a public class is the right space for personal individual adjustments. And I think I know your answer on that one, right? But like, and like, I'm not even saying that I disagree with that notion at all or in general as a blanket statement, but like, I do think that there is some component of coming to a group class where like maybe you like being anonymous, you know what I mean? Or like maybe you are getting more out of it than, not like than you would in a smaller class, but there might be something about like the energetic component of having like a larger class that can be helpful as a student, I think. And then as a teacher, um, so sometimes when I've had bigger classes, I find it a little bit, I certainly feel like I cannot teach to the level that I want to,
Hmm.
just because there's like no space or there's like a lot of like variables to consider. But I don't know that I necessarily like dislike it.
Hmm.
I don't know. That one I think I have to think about a little bit more. But I guess my main point is like it kind of depends on how you define a good yoga class in the first place.
Yeah. And I think that that's true. I think that, um, I think that if I'm a person already familiar with the teacher and their verbiage and their sequencing, and I'm already very self-aware in my own body, then
Right.
being in a big group of people where I can get lost in the flow, okay. But
Right.
but I think that on the spectrum of body awareness, self-awareness, yoga, intelligence, right? The lower you are on the ladder, the smaller classes should be.
I agree with this for sure.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
And
Well,
so
because you
it,
just have to build that awareness first before
yeah,
throwing them into a giant class. Otherwise, that's how you get students who like learn by simply like looking around, being like warrior two, and like they never know, like never. It's gonna take
totally,
like a million years to actually know what that even means, right? Or to
totally,
get any kind of specific instruction beyond like, oh, I like bend my knee this way, and then I put my arms out, and then like but
totally.
nobody learns to move like that. And I'm not saying that yoga is just a sport. I don't think that. But when you if we take the physical component and compare it to like any sport or like dance, like nobody fucking learns that just by watching other people and never getting any specific instruction, right? Like you learn the foundations and you drill them in first, and that's how you become good at soccer or football or whatever, right?
Totally, totally. And like football, right? Whether it's soccer or American football or any of the things in between, you play a position. So not only are you not like as well versed in the sport, you're like specializing it down to a like very fine degree. We as yoga teachers are trying to specialize people across a huge
Right. We're like teaching to
skill
everyone.
range, right?
Hmm.
It's like teaching a quarterback to be a receiver and a defensive lineman all at once, right? It's like in high school or junior high when people had to play offense and defense, right? It's like for those not football people out there, sorry, go down that rabbit hole. But that's really what we're doing. We're like, in my opinion, that's what we ought to be doing is teaching people to like come to the pose as well as protect themselves from the pose, right?
Totally.
and and so if I'm teaching 40 people, I don't know where the lowest common denominator is, right? And so I no longer have a choice in teaching not only to anyone in particular, but not even to say, is everybody in this room capable of even half of what I'm asking them for? Are they pushing themselves to places that they shouldn't be because I don't know they're not ready, right? And
Mm, yeah.
and so, I know we've kind of gone down a rabbit hole here, but I think that we we shouldn't look at huge classes as the benchmark to achieve, at least not until you are in a like very uniform like level, right? Class wise, practitioner wise, and that no matter what level those students are at, if you're still only leading a sequence and not teaching every pose, something's going to go wrong at some point for someone.
Definitely.
And I will acknowledge a certain level of hypocrisy here, because now that I'm teaching online and I have chosen to record these classes, so I'm not, I'm in my Zoom room, and as people come in, I'm on gallery view, so I can see everybody log in and I know pretty much who's in there unless they come in late. But then in order to record without showing everybody else's face in practice,
Mm,
I'm I go to the speaker view and I pin my video. And so it's just me and I can't see my practitioners anymore. So
right.
when I'm recording, I'm demoing 100% of the time, which is not the case when I teach live at all,
Same. Yeah, for sure. That's been a
right?
huge difference for me.
Huge difference. And so I find myself kind of going back to as if I were teaching somebody who'd never done any yoga.
Yeah.
I'm finding that, I mean, I'm wordy to start with, but now that I don't have other personal like people to look at, individuals to adjust and say, okay, your feet 4 inches wider, blah, 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 which is how I normally teach. It's a little ridiculous, but helpful and thoughtful. Now I'm literally in my own body at the top of the mat, and I'm like, the minutia is just pouring out of me, and we're moving so slowly. um Even when we're flowing, I'm still giving like really action cues, right? Like pushing through the outer edge of your foot, pushing the thigh underneath you, gathering the belly in, puffing up the back of the ribs, like whatever it is. It's still a lot of extra information, um because I can't see people as individuals.
Totally. You
And
have to
so,
like throw everything out there that you can to be helpful.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel that so hard. I noticed I was like, I think I talk a lot more because I'm like, hopefully this helps. Or sometimes it feels like I have this moment of like, maybe it broke and no one's watching and I'm just like talking. And also I think it's a glimpse in the way that I practice, because I think of all of those things all the time when I'm doing a yoga class. Um, and I realized like, man, my class is hard. Like I didn't realize that. And so I started taking it and I was like, damn, if you like do every single thing, yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, and you creep through.
Mm-hmm.
You do like half as many postures. It's like, I if I'm on my own and I'm just flowing, even with my like action, like you're working so hard, even with my action, my minutia, right? I really can only practice for like 45 to 60 minutes maybe, because I'm like so detail oriented, and I maybe have only done like 7 postures. And so, I might repeat some of those, but I only really get through about 7. Um, and I find that it's like, okay, when I'm teaching, it takes twice as long to do those 7 postures, because I'm like, literally articulating every little thing that I would do naturally.
Totally.
And it just eats time. It's just,
I've definitely felt that. It's been a fun adjustment for sure.
yeah. I think that
Yeah.
like the students appreciate it though. I've had people who have been my students for a long time live coming in and being like, you know what? That was the first time that I got into this posture. This is the first time I got shoulder stand and my shoulder didn't hurt. And this is like,
It's a cool feeling.
yeah, it is. It is a cool
I'm
feeling.
like constantly surprised at how much people like want to learn. I think because sometimes in my teaching experience, the people who have been loudest to me in my face have been the people who have been like haters of like the details, right? Because they'll like the people who want to complain, they're the loudest. And so I often will like err on the side of like, I'm going to be talking too much if I explain this.
Right.
So I try to like be really succinct. But then I've noticed so much success when I like take a leap of faith and like explain things. And maybe that's because you've like built a trust with your student base over time. These are the people who want to hear those details. And I think that's a matter of like finding the right studio and the right people and like trusting yourself. It certainly is a skill to like go from like, I'm a new teacher with these people. How do I build their trust so that I can get to the place where when I'm talking a lot, they don't think I'm just like self-serving, right?
Totally. Yes.
So that's been like super interesting to me and has helped me really come out of my shell, I think, as a teacher.
Yeah. I think that there's this interesting dynamic in teaching the way that we do with that detail oriented situation, is that we require our students to like really trust us in a particular way. And then the flip side of that is that we can't trust our students at all. Like,
right. It's like you've got to like you
can't
have to pay
trust
such close
you.
attention. You can't trust that they're ever doing what you're saying in like the most loving way possible, because we understand that like body awareness is like hard to come by, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not a bad thing. It's just something you have to accept. And like, oh, actually, that's it's really funny. It makes me think of like I was like, I have a friend and I said like, oh, you have really tight hips or like really tight hamstrings, just like in passing because he was in my class. And then he was like, I cannot stop thinking about that time you told me I have tight hamstrings. And I was like, oh my God, I like offended you so much. Cause to me, it's just a fact that has absolutely no emotional weight to it. It's like the same thing as being like, hey, you like changed your hair, right? Or like, oh, like you got a new shirt. Like it's
Exactly.
like that one. Like
You're
your
wearing
hips
my
are tight.
favorite sweatshirt today. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't
And
mean
so it's
I
like,
hate all your other sweatshirts. It's just that I love this.
exactly. And it's so funny how people can potentially like tie so much self-worth, or like they can take so much from these little comments that we don't think mean anything. I realized I have really bad like bedside manners. I think I was teaching someone else, and like, oh my God, I'm like really embarrassed about this. And he gives me a lot of shit, but I won't say who it is. But it was, I'm sure you'll guess. But I was teaching him, and we do privates, and I said something like, oh, you're like pretty flexible, all things considered. And he was like, what do you mean all things considered? He's like, do you mean because I'm old? And I was like, oh my God, that is what I meant, but not like that. And he gives me shit for that every time I see him, but we have like a really good relationship. But I think it's really funny because like I don't think anything of it. I'm like, God, so bad. I'm learning a lot.
Here's the thing. I think that you observing that you think you have bad bedside manner is one thing. I think also, I mean, again, this is probably a whole other podcast episode about like trauma-informed yoga, yada, yada, yada. But if we kind of circle back and we come back to this idea that we are responsible for teaching our students to be the better students, then part of our responsibility is pointing out the places where they're not using their critical thinking.
Yeah.
Pointing out the places that they do need individual specified work, whether that's tight hamstrings or, you know what? You are more flexible than I expected. Great. Now we'll work with that. Okay. Like this is not a personal judgment. I have no value associated with this in you, like being good or
Totally.
bad as a human or as a yogi. I take it upon myself as my professional and spiritual responsibility to teach you to think about your practice in a practical, applicable, functional way. And so
Totally.
for you to know that your hamstrings are tight is a big deal. Don't take that personally, dude. Like take that as a like gift.
It's a learning opportunity,
it's
right?
A learning opportunity.
I can do things with this information.
Exactly.
What if it's like not telling someone they have food in their teeth, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, wouldn't you want me to tell you about this big black sesame seed like jammed right in there, and that you know every time you smile, it's a beautiful smile, but there's this like pockmark in it. Like,
yeah,
yes,
it's just it'd be like taking that personally. It's ridiculous.
Totally.
No
You'd
need.
be way more embarrassed and pissed off if I didn't tell you. If I didn't
Yeah.
tell you you had these short hamstrings and therefore you should adapt here, here, and here to A, make them longer, and B, not hurt your back in compensation, that's a gift.
I think so too.
Be grateful, motherfucker. Come on.
That's gonna be my new tagline. Be grateful, motherfucker. Every time someone's like, that was so rude.
Maybe that's our new sign off. Be grateful, motherfucker.
Be grateful. I don't know how you cannot be grateful when you hear that. I'm super grateful. I'd be like, yes, okay, I'm grateful. I'm sorry.
Totally. Well, and here's the flip side, the shadow side of this, right? Since we've gone there, what about when our teachers give us adjustments that like you and I, who are already really critical thinkers and have really sound biomechanical knowledge, you come into a class that's been recommended to you and the teacher tries to like give you a traditional like alignment.
It happens to me all the time.
Totally. And like how do you deal with that? Because like in teacher training, the students always ask, right? They're like, well, now that I'm changing all these things about my practice and I'm thinking about it in this other way, when I take class and my teacher comes to like adjust me out of that, what do I do? What do I say? What do I tell them? What would you say?
Ooh, it depends on how sassy I'm feeling.
Okay.
And how egregious the adjustment is. Sometimes I'll make like a small adjustment, or so if I like don't want to say anything, depending on like the mood or the atmosphere, I might like do the thing that they say, and then when they like turn around, I just go back to doing whatever. Um, because it also has so much to do with like, and this is a totally different conversation, but it's like how much respect should you be giving to your teacher
Yeah.
or not? Like how much do you take literally the thought like this is my practice? You know what I mean? And I don't even mean that in a way where I believe really strongly one side or the other. I just mean like if we encourage people to think like what is my practice, but also you're like in a class with a teacher, like how much do you defer to who and why and when and how? So sometimes I won't say anything and I'll just like do my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think one time I said, I'm working on something specific, and then I just like didn't say anything else. And they seemed okay with it. And like when I ask people, before I give adjustments to people, I'll be like, oh, why don't you try doing this? Or like, can I recommend something to you? And they'll be like, yes. Or if they say like, oh, like this hurts, so this is why I'm doing it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. Like I usually try to open it up with like a question or like acknowledging that it's simply a suggestion from me without having the full picture and the full context of their practice because it's a group class. Right. And I think that part is super key, but that's coming from a teacher's perspective. So
sure. I also definitely use that I'm working on something specific. I tell my teacher trainees that I'm like, oh, that's usually a big one. Like I'm working with a private teacher. We're working on something, anything in that group of statements. I also like highly recommend, like if you know that you are a student of non-traditional alignments, if you don't know the teacher and you don't know what's coming, talk to them before class. Give them a heads up. Just be like, hey, just so you know, I practice hips width apart. My feet never touch. That's not going to happen. Like I have this thing with my arms. I put my hands wide, not under my shoulders or armpits or whatever. Just so you know, like it's not personal. I'm not contradicting you. I just have some specific bony alignment things that I'm working with. So I preempt some of it, but then I also open up the gate. I'm like, but if you see that I'm like completely like wonky because I know my proprioception is really off in my hips, could you keep an eye on that specifically for me, right? Like I might be asking for feedback on that. Like, am I straight? Am I too much? Am I not enough? Like, and so it opens it up to say, hey, I still respect you as a teacher. And also I've got some really specific things that I'm working with. Don't fuck with them. Like,
yeah. And I think it's also important to remember, like, hopefully we don't feel scared to do that. Like, I know that some people feel like self-conscious or like scared that it might like put someone off. And I think that's a really understandable fear. I also think that like if a teacher were to ever feel that offended by you doing your own thing, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
In my perspective.
Well, I think your own thing varies, right? Like, okay,
yeah.
if you're coming into class,
this is true.
You're
it varies.
like doing subtle variations on what we're doing, and that's your own thing, no problem. If you're doing a completely different practice, I just question why you're there. Why are you paying the money to be there? Like,
totally
makes sense. I did, and I have had people come in and say, you know, hey, I'm just gonna kind of like do my own thing, just so you know. And usually they actually follow along most of the time. They might take more breaks. They might like, you know,
like
rest
at the end they
for
like
a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta tell you, one of the classes I subbed a few weeks before we went into quarantine, bless this woman's heart. Like she came in, she's like, no, I'll be working on some of my own stuff. Like, don't take it personally. I'm like have some issues that I'm dealing with. Well, when she said that, I thought, oh yeah, she'll be modifying some things and whatever. And then she was doing literally the opposite of some of the things I said. And I came over to her and I was like, in the flow. And I just kind of whispered, I was like, hey, do you want it? She's like, no. Stay away. And I'm like, okay, you said you wanted to do your own thing. She meant it. And she did. She did her almost entire own practice in that space. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take her at her word. She said she wanted to do. You know what? You do you. That's not on me. That's like, okay, perfect. Like,
totally.
I believe you. And so it was a good learning environment for me to experience that, like her like creating such strong boundaries and also not taking it personally, because she did say in the beginning, hey, I'm going to be like working on some stuff. I'm like, all right. I misinterpreted that in the beginning. That's on me. I'm okay.
Yeah. Ooh,
Totally.
I think that's a huge point. Like not taking it personally as a teacher, right? Because I think that sometimes our ego can get into it a little bit,
Oh, for sure.
which is
Especially when we
totally
do it like
normal.
we do.
Yeah. So it's complicated, that's for sure.
It is. It
But
is complicated. Um, I I feel like we have come a long way from our original question of free versus like not free. But I think that we've covered a lot of quality oriented discussion, which really does loop back to that original question of free or not free, to
totally.
free or not free the yoga. Um, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how yoga practitioners come back after the
I'm
quarantine.
really curious too. I think it could go either way, where people might really enjoy the ability and the freedom to do it at home. But I maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I think that people will come back like wanting a community, like really missing their community.
Yeah,
That's what I hope, at least.
I think they will. I think that it's going to be a split. I think that even the people who love their community are going to be like, hey, I can access teachers from around the world right now. Like, I have clients from the East Coast, from England, from Seattle, from like, I only have a couple people here in Portland who are logging in all the time. I have people from all over who haven't been able to be with me since I left Seattle in 2017. So
Yeah.
it's that's a big deal. And so I think in some respects, yeah, getting in your car and going to the yoga studio and being a part of that community is awesome, except on those days when you have a million other things to do, and the act of getting in your car and going to the yoga studio and being in your community takes 3 hours out of your
I've been
day,
there.
instead of just like literally showing up in your pajamas and going with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I guess we'll see.
we will. We will
Yeah.
see. Well, this has
Cool.
been a really good conversation. I think we
I think
covered a
so
lot
too.
of very interesting ground. I hope that for all of our listeners and viewers, this was educational and thought provoking. And I'd be curious to hear what you guys say. So if you have any commentary, you can use our contact form at yogaengineer.com to submit any questions or comments, and we will get back to those as soon as possible. Be nice. And if you're not nice, we'll ignore you, because we're
Yeah,
not
be
putting
nice, motherfuckers.
exactly. And if you want us to stop using f-bombs, I respectfully decline. So, in any
Cool.
case,
What a
Elena,
great sign off.
yeah, what is today's sign off? It's not keep on the button. We know that.
It's be grateful,
Be
bitches.
grateful, bitches. Yeah, be grateful, bitches. Like,
Dude, we have to make podcast t-shirts that say that now.
totally. Yeah, in gratitude.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alina. I appreciate you. I'm glad that you're here with me, even though you're far away.
Yeah, it's been nice. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We in it together. Like, I know that's a little bit of a cliche at this point, but you and me, we
We
really
got
are.
this. Yeah, totally.
Awesome.
I love it.
Thanks, everybody. We are the Yoga Engineers. You can find more content and more information at our YouTube channel, as well as yogaengineer.com. I am currently posting some of my full-length classes there. You can also get free streaming, donation-based, let's call it that, instead of free, yoga classes. They're 75 minutes long, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Zoom. You can find that link at yogaengineer.com/yoga. And very soon we will be posting some of Elena's little mini workshops. She does these beautiful videos that specialize in specific actions and specific body parts and how to activate what it is you need to activate to recover, heal, move through and learn about. So thanks so much. We appreciate you. Couldn't do it without you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time. Take care.